everyone, welcome to this week's SEO in the Shed webinar about how to own the top spot in your sector using Pi. I know we emailed saying we were going to cover a little bit of the May core update in this webinar, but unfortunately John Earnshaw hasn't been able to make it to this week's SEO in the Shed. You'll notice you're not looking at John and you're also not seeing a shed. But we do have a webinar coming up with him in the next couple of days on the core update, so keep your eyes peeled for more comms about that. But I do have the next best thing with me today, which is another John. So I'd like to welcome onto SEO in the Shed John Barker, who's our head of solutions. I'm sure loads of you have met him already through your experiences with Pi. But John, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to everyone?
Yeah, thanks, Soph. So I'm John, the other John in Pi, and I've been at Pi for nearly as long as John Earnshaw as well. So I think about 13, 14 years. So hopefully today I can offer a little bit around what Pi has to offer as well.
Yep, and John's not in a shed, but does have a fantastic jumper. So hopefully that will make up for it. And I'm Sophie, I'm the head of product and marketing at Pi. So I'm busy working with the team to try and make our platform as good as possible, so you're getting loads of value out of it. And our team are also responsible for delivering the leaderboards, which you should receive quarterly. So let's jump straight in. So for those of you who aren't already Pi customers, there's no one better here than John to give a little bit of an overview of Pi. So take it away.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, so I suppose there's hundreds of different SEO tools out there, and we talk a lot about rank trackers, and then we talk about like technical tools. What we like to think Pi as is a search intelligence platform. Okay, so we are, as a business, we're site agnostic, and the platform is site agnostic. And what that allows us to do is understand the complete picture of where you're positioned, the value of where you're positioned, the opportunity, and how to gain that opportunity. And hopefully today we'll be able to show you a couple of those journeys and how you can work with Pi as well.
Brilliant, thanks. So let's get stuck in. How to own the top spot in your sector using Pi. So we know obviously not every website is the same, but what we're going to cover today is our process that we use with customers and prospects that we think works really nicely across all different types of websites, e-commerce, publishing, affiliates, because all of the different stages are relevant given their own context. So our process at Pi is to use a research, plan, implement, evaluate flywheel. So we're going to cover each of those different stages today and talk you through how you can use the Pi platform to enhance some of your strategies in those areas. So researching is obviously looking at all the opportunity you have out there. Are you tracking the right search terms? Are you tracking the terms competitors are looking at? Are you making sure you're present for your really high value terms, and all of that? Planning is obviously thinking about what goals you want to put in place for yourself, what kind of content you need to be creating, what time you need to be releasing it, what different teams you need to be working with to make sure that you're getting the most out of your content plan. Implementation, I mean, you guys are all the experts at that, but making sure that once you've got all those focus terms in place, that you've got a really strong implementation strategy. And then evaluation. So how well have you done against your initial goals, and what else did you learn? What new could you look at? And obviously all of that evaluation and measurement fits back into your research cycle. So we're just going to go through that process today and give you a couple of tips about how to use Pi to help you. So let's get started with research. So I'll let John talk you through this because I know for a fact it's John Barker's favorite chart in the whole of Pi.
Thanks, Soph. Yeah, this is really my favourite chart. And the big reason for that is it allows us to understand, well, what happens next? What's the value of what happens to next as well? So this particular chart breaks down your keyword universe into all of the different categories that you're working in. Now, it allows us to understand, well, what is our current performance and what's the value of that? Where is the benchmark in the market? When we're looking at the top players, where can we get to? For me, the most important colour is that pink, however. Now, what the pink does here on this particular chart is it allows us to understand the value of the content that's sitting on pages 2 and 3 of Google. And it really says to us, well, if we can go after that particular category, how much return are we going to get on that? Now, in SEO, it's always been a bit of a difficult question to ask. If we invest this amount of money, how much money are we going to get back? Now in PPC, we've been able to do that for years and years and years. With this chart, that helps answer this for the SEO teams within your business. So for me, it tells us where to start our journey and where to go next.
Brilliant. And that's quite a high topic level, isn't it, John? So once we've identified the different categories and topics that you think, if you focus your attention on these topics, you're probably going to be getting the best ROI on your strategy. You can start looking at the detail and in more granularity. So to do that in Pi, we go to our old favorite Position Explorer table. So if you're in Position Explorer table, John, what kind of filters would you be applying to ensure you are finding some valuable terms to be focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, this particular table you can do so much with. For me, if I want to go after that pink, that opportunity, that content that's sitting there on pages 2 and 3, we can use these predefined filters, the positions 11 to 30. But then we might have a huge amount of search terms that are sitting in that particular way. So we might want to filter that down even more. We might want to look at search volume above a particular amount, maybe 1,000 searches a month. We then may even want to toggle it by movement over a period of time as well. So which pieces of content are actually moving up the SERPs in the biggest way? So we can actually toggle it by movement, positive movement. There's lots of different factors that you can use. Maybe you want to look at your page 1 positions, and I think that's quite important as well. Understanding, well, what's the current content that is, I suppose in a way, risk mitigated. We need to have an understanding of, well, if that drops off, what do we do next? Okay, and that's another thing we can look at, positions 1 to 3, maybe 1 to 5. So in this particular table, we can do many different things.
Yeah, and earlier, John, you were talking about potentially setting up alerts for those position drops or position gains. And I think what we were talking about is in SEO, I think you can get quite overwhelmed by the tens or hundreds of thousands of search terms you're tracking. And what we don't always talk about is focus. So once you have identified those high value terms that you think are going to be your opportunity terms and also your protection terms, so the terms that are already delivering a lot of value for you, it's probably a good idea to set up some focus workspaces around those different types of terms and set alerts up on those as well. So what alerts would you be setting up, John?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's lots of different alerts that you can set up. I think there's alerts, and actually there's insights as well. So insights allows you to save a particular screen or a particular set of search terms that you're looking at any given point. Maybe that's your opportunity terms, maybe that's your risk mitigation terms. So you can kind of section those off and have those as a particular insight. When we're talking about alerts, however, that's slightly different. So the alerts on Pi, if we were to look at our positions 1 to 3 and they were to move out of those 3 positions and even move by 1 position, we can be alerted to that. They're moving in and out of the top 10, we can be alerted to that. And the reverse of that works as well. So if we're actually outside of the top 10 results and we move into the top 10, we want to be alerted to that as well. So you can set those alerts up in many different ways.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks. So obviously at the moment we've covered how you find opportunity using terms you're already aware of and you're already tracking within Pi, but hopefully a lot of you have already used the data discovery tool within Pi, but this obviously helps discovering new terms that you could go after. So how would you go through a journey on data discovery, John?
Yeah, I mean, I love this new tool, and the main reason for that is in the past, and still to this day really, when we go through the onboarding process, the majority of people that come on board with Pi understand what their keyword universe is already. Okay, so they probably have about 80–90% of those keywords that they know they're going after. So we put those into Pi. What this helps us do is understand potential gaps in search terms that they haven't got in their world already. So we can utilize this by planting seeds, looking at competitor sites and understanding, well, what are the search terms we're not currently tracking? What particular search terms are growing with the trends? Okay, what's more seasonal? And really importantly as well, what different SERP features are returning for those different keywords? So this allows us to find the gaps in our already kind of big world of keywords as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So an important part at the end of research and before you get into planning is obviously to benchmark where you are and where you want to get to. And we find it really helps build internal business cases if you set out right at the start where you think you're going to be and what value you think you're going to drive, which is obviously made easier with tools like estimated revenue that John has already taken you through. So there are loads of different things you can set goals around, most obviously rankings, traffic, revenue, and then when communicating maybe more to senior stakeholders, share of voice and general visibility. And goals are obviously different based on your own business's objectives and your own personal objectives. But what are some of the most common ones you've seen, John?
For me, it normally depends on the type of business that you are, because I suppose when we're talking to senior stakeholders or other team members, we're probably looking at different metrics throughout. Okay, so for example, if we're looking at a publishing site, we may want to look at the traffic that comes to the site, but also the advertising revenue behind that as well. E-commerce sites, they care about revenue. How much money are we going to make from moving the dial in this particular way? However, I suppose when we're talking to our senior stakeholders, share of voice is so important. They're probably not going to care so much about the rankings. The odd term here and there, maybe yes, but that share of voice and where we're positioned in the market, that is vital.
Cool. So moving swiftly on from research, we can go into the planning part of our strategy. So a really important part of planning when you have already identified all the search terms you're going to go after is thinking about what type of content you want to create. And we found, despite loads being written up about it in Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Watch, on our own blog, a lot of people still aren't considering the full opportunity of multiple different SERP features. So for every topic you're targeting or you're looking into, there is more that can be done rather than just creating, long form content to get those classic links. It's different per different topics usually, and it does change over time. And we're seeing a lot of people get a lot of additional traffic and revenue through optimizing for these features. What's your experience of the uptake of this so far?
For me, I know this is one of John Earnshaw's favourite views in Pi, understanding the entire landscape. Okay, so I think he's done webinars and talks about not getting just to page one, okay, but actually owning all of page one. And that's kind of really vital when we can understand the different types of content that we need to go after. What questions do we need to answer? What video content is really pushing in a particular category? Maybe it's images that take over in a particular way. And it really kind of also looks at the advertising as well. So is it product listing ads? Is it text ads? So this allows us to get a full comprehensive view of all of the SERPs that's happening around a particular category. And for me, that becomes really vital when we're trying to work with other teams as well.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that other teams bit, because it's not as easy as just kind of keeping SEO now with the SEO team and the content creators. There's usually a few teams that you have to tie into getting this spot on, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit later as well. But actually, SEO a long time ago used to be isolated. You'd be in a team on your own, very much so, and you wouldn't talk to the rest of the business. SEO now, as we all know, really you need to be working with your content teams, with your buy-in teams, with your kind of your PPC and your bidding teams, because unless you've got that full picture of everything that's going on in your digital worlds, you're going to miss the boat in certain areas. So it's vital that you talk to the other teams.
Yeah, and the hard work is worth it, right? Because we see the people that do this well and they do get some massive gains from it. Absolutely.
They don't just try and get to page one, position one. They answer all of those questions. They've got video content to back that up. The images are optimized in exactly the right way. They're really owning the entire of page one rather than just that position.
Yeah. And John Earnshaw's favorite line, they've got into the mind of the consumer. That's that in his absence. So from John Earnshaw's favorite charts and mine, so I absolutely love looking at search trends in Pi. Again, people think SEO isn't very predictable and that we don't really know what's going to happen and what trends are going to occur. And whilst a lot of that is true, we don't know what the weather's going to be like, for example, so we don't know what type of clothing people are going to be searching. We do find that there are more than you would think, some very predictable trends going back, and you can see that through the historic data in Pi. So here we're looking at the fashion landscape over time from the end of 2018 to the end of 2021. And you can see here some very obvious seasonal patterns and some nice growth in there as well. So this is a very top level view of, women's wear, menswear. Why is that word so difficult to say? And accessories, but you do see us at a more granular level as well. And handing this search trends chart to your content teams really does help them to plan out exactly when they should be planning, optimizing and releasing their content to see it succeed, because let's face it, no content writer wants to spend ages on a piece of work that just gets buried in Google and never seen. So any tips you can give them to help ensure they're getting maximum visibility on that work is only going to be well received. Do you have any good examples of this, John?
Yeah, I mean, I remember this from it must have been about maybe 2-3 years ago, and I think in the women's wear fashion area there was a big thing about animal print. Okay, and we noticed a massive spike, this massive upward curve around animal print. Now, one of the businesses that we've worked with really went into detail around this, and what they actually noticed was that animal print, yes, it was growing, okay, but then they broke that down into the different animals, so zebra print, leopard print, lion print, whatever you've got here, and then they noticed that the actual growth in those areas was even bigger. Okay, so it wasn't just around animal print. And what they did is they changed their strategy. So rather than having an animal print landing page, they broke that down by zebra print landing page, leopard print landing page. And then all of a sudden, the additional traffic that they drove from that really increased their revenue, and they actually got a better conversion on that as well. So it's not just about looking at what your keyword groups are already, actually break that down even more, understand the different trends within that as well.
Yeah, and I think that once you have a good success story like that internally, it's so much easier to get internal buy-in from other stakeholders and other teams, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, so we do have a little strategy that we use at Pi called Plan, Influence, Peak, Repeat. So we shorten it to PIPA. So when you see those trend lines and you see those repeatable trend lines, you can have different tactics at each different stage of those kind of peaks and troughs. So as we said, make sure you're planning well enough in advance to be able to create some good content on those topics. Make sure you're already influencing people when that rise of that peak is happening. And then around the peak of the trends, maybe talk to your paid search team and talk about how high the CPCs might be when it's the most competitive, most in demand time of year for those products, and maybe your organic strategy could take some of that. And if you've got full visibility on page one through utilizing all of those SERP features, you might not necessarily have to spend as much on paid. And then repeat. So at the end of a trend, take stock and think, is this going to be a trend again, or can we get rid of this content? If it is going to be a trend again, obviously you want to keep the page and just refresh the content and add to it. If it's not going to be a trend again, then it's time to go and focus on something completely different where you are going to be getting opportunity. So on to implementation. There's obviously so much that could be said about SEO implementation, so we've just kept it to a few kind of top tips, mainly around looking at your competitors and top performers in the sector and analyze what they're doing. So hopefully a lot of you see our industry quarterly leaderboards. These are the kind of top performers in SEO, the creme de la creme of people doing this really well. And if you do have one of these in your sector, it's really good to go and look at what you think they're doing well. There are lots of different tools in Pi to be able to analyze successes that they're getting and why that is. There's obviously the competitor discovery tool in Pi as well to do this if one of your sectors isn't covered by our leaderboards. But one of the ways you can really dig into the success of your competitors is looking at their high value backlinks. So John, do you want to talk a little bit through how you can use the backlink tool in Pi to find some new opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, this is when we're doing that competitor analysis and we're trying to understand, well, what's giving a site authority. There's lots of different things to do that. Internal linking is one, and we can name probably hundreds of different things, but backlinks are still vitally important. Now, when we're utilizing Pi's backlink tool, we're lucky we can use majestic metrics, trust flow, citation flow, okay? And for me, what I do is, and I suppose this works with the PR team and your outreach teams, is that I look at the different publications that are already linking to us online. So I go to the backlinking tool, look at the referring domains, sort that by maybe trust flow or citation flow, and then start to understand, well, what publications are really pushing content to the particular sites that we know are doing really well. Then it's almost like trying to mimic that same what's what I'm looking for? I suppose same tactic is the word I was looking for. There you go. So we can go after those same sites.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's kind of sometimes a little bit of a buried tool in Pi, but it can add so much value to finding new people to be working with. So thanks for going over that. And also it's really good to have some reactive tactics in place, because obviously things will change, like new search trends will come along, new opportunities will present themselves within a season or within a quarter. So it's really good to have a playbook in advance of how you're going to deal with some of those situations. One of the things we found that really helps you keep an eye on what customers are thinking about a topic or a product is using People Also Ask. So our kind of new, I mean, it was live a couple of months ago, but the People Also Ask tool in Pi Labs harvests all the questions that customers are asking around a particular product or question, like we said, and it really helps you understand what customers are thinking about that. So do you want to give a quick overview of this tool, John?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier on as well that the opportunity chart is one of my favorite charts or tools in Pi. This is a very close second. And the biggest reason for that is I get asked a lot in the sales process. I mean, what questions are our customers asking about the products that we sell? And I mean, this really starts to go dig deep into that particular analysis. And what I mean by that is we understand, well, how many questions are there? I mean, in the women's wear one, there's over 2,000 questions we can see. Where do we start on that People Also Ask? What this does is it actually identifies the questions with the most amount of views. It also tells us, well, how many times is that particular question returning on big keywords that we're going after? And we know that People Also Ask is always, 9 times out of 10, very high up in the SERP landscape. So if we can start to answer these questions and actually look at the people that are already answering these questions, then we've got a good chance of actually trying to get there ourselves. The really important thing as well is that questions change. Okay, I think I was looking at computing the other day and I was looking at different questions around Nintendo versus Xbox versus PlayStation, and then is PlayStation back in stock now? And they're the kind of things that we need to understand in order to make sure that we've got our content strategy right and making sure we answer those questions as well.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. And I think as well, usually the content that you can add, you can tag it potentially onto some long form content that you already have around that topic and just slot in some FAQs at the bottom. And so few people are utilizing People Also Ask that you've got a really good chance of appearing for some of those questions straight away with not a huge amount of effort, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think more and more we're seeing e-commerce sites putting content at the top of the pages. Yes, rightfully so. But they've also got this massive blog section, magazine section, whatever kind of section that they really want to write about. And they want new ideas and new concepts to write about. Well, this is a great place to start, really, because if you can understand what those questions are that are going to generate at least what we believe is going to be the most amount of traffic, then let's answer those questions within our new content, and then also link that content straight to the landing pages that are related to that as well. I mean, it's a simple strategy, but it really does work.
Yeah, love this one, thanks. And then finally on to evaluate. So obviously there are thousands of areas in Pi where you can evaluate the progress you're making, the visibility you're gaining, but we've just picked some of our favorites to go through for different types of use cases of how you would evaluate your performance. So starting with our favorite daily data chart. So crack on, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think John Earnshaw would not be happy with me unless I said daily data is so important. Okay, so when we're looking at the SERP landscape or anything like that, yes, looking at all of the features, vitally important. But having daily data and being able to track your performance every day is vital. And that's for quite a lot of different reasons. Is your URL changing? We've got a conflict issue. Have we jumped up in Google and why has that happened? Or has a load of search terms also dropped down? We need to understand why that's happening. And unless you've got daily data, you can't do that. Now, the lovely thing about this as well is you can set up those alerts that we spoke about at the beginning. So if any of these positions move, we can be alerted to it and taken directly to this chart.
Yeah, whoever this is obviously doing very well, so well done then. I'm not really sure who it is, but obviously deserves some kind of pay rise. Right, SERPs, talk us through this one.
Yeah, this has got quite a few different uses actually. For me, the two main core uses that I use it for is understanding row analysis. So if we look here, we've got pretty much a grid of small dots, and each small dot means a different SERP feature returning on that particular day. Now, what I normally want to understand is, well, what the top position 1, position 2, position 3, what's more likely the piece of content that's going to return around there? Is it a classic link? Is it a map packet? Is it a knowledge panel? What's going to finish at the top more often than not? So we can analyze that row. What we can also do is then click on any day and understand a wireframe of what the page would have looked like. how much real estate is people also are taking up, or the site links or video content. So this allows us to analyze each individual search term on a really granular basis to understand, well, what content do we need and when? So for me, brilliant again.
Okay. And obviously you can see your performance here as well. So you would hope that your performance wouldn't just be in classic links once you'd gone through some of that opportunity investigation, and that you would be getting performance across all SERP features as well.
Yeah, and I mean, by saving all of your different sets, really, your video content, your YouTube content and like that within Pi, and then tagging that up as a group of your portfolio, then you can put that into the matrix, and it allows you to look at the different areas you're performing in as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, the famous visibility index.
Yeah, these are brilliant, aren't they? The big reason for these being brilliant is not just understanding a search term movement, but actually understanding how the visibility of your website changes at any point in time. Now, we spoke about, I think the algorithm update is going to have a webinar in the next couple of days. What these charts are going to show is who's moving up, who's moving down, what categories are getting hit the most. And again, because we're site agnostic, we understand the entirety of the whole SERP. So that means anyone that's moving up and down, anywhere in any category, we can understand that by looking at movement up, down, and where is that hitting them the hardest.
Yeah,
or maybe the most as well.
Super interesting things around the May algorithm update. So we're just, as we said, we'll have a webinar on that in a couple of days to show you the different performance charts. But it's great to see, as John said, the industry as a whole and where you sit within that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, share of voice. Not the best example of a share of voice chart, but still very interesting to see. So why is this chart useful versus some of the others at communicating internally, John?
I mean, when we speak about visibility indexes, we speak about every search term is equal. Okay, so it doesn't matter if a search term searched 100 times a month or 1,000,000 times a month, that search term is equal to each. When we look at share of voice, what we understand is that every search term that we're looking at has its own unique value. Now, most tools, when they look at share of voice, they look at purely search volume. But what we do at Pi is we look at that search term and say, well, yes, this is the search volume and where we're positioned, but we also look at the CPC rate. How competitive is this keyword? And then when we combine all of those together, we get a true understanding about the share of voice of, once again, any site. And it's really important to look at the data in that particular way.
Yeah, and we found senior stakeholders really pay attention to this chart. So if you're talking them through kind of traffic and rankings and their ears aren't really pricking up, this is one that does communicate the value of your work in a way that we found senior stakeholders to really pay attention to.
Yeah, they want to know where they're placed in the market. Exactly that.
Yeah, stats that they use too. So we've gone through a couple of the tactics of how to use Pi to get to the top spot. Everything that we've shown today, our top performing customers are using, and they're benefiting and they're increasing all their visibility. But we did ask some of our top performing customers what they thought about what was the success that they would attribute getting to the top spots to. So there's a couple of different responses kind of outside of Pi that they talked about, which we thought were really interesting to share with you. So the first one was building a strong team. So all of our customers that are really smashing it in the SERPs, they do have a really good, strong team. They invest in educating them through the Pi Academy, through joining SEO in the Shed webinars, but through lots of other industry events as well. And they really concentrate on making that team influencers within the business. So building internal case studies and sharing it within their own business of why they're doing their work. Do you have anything to add to that, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched upon it earlier, but working in unity with other teams. I mean, building a strong SEO team, vitally important, yes. But actually, SEO teams got to work with the content teams, the buying teams, the PPC teams, the senior stakeholders. And it's got to be one unit working together, because that's the only way you start to own all of the space around you rather than just focusing on just the SEO.
Yeah, they concentrate a lot on kind of a little bit of internal PR of the job they're doing, why it's so important and why they need help from other teams. And that does make a huge difference to their performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second, I mean, we've talked about it a lot today, but finding new areas for opportunity. So not only do we find they find and they're constantly looking for those new areas of opportunity, but they stay hyper-focused. So say they find a new area for opportunity, they'll probably review everything else they're doing and take away something that isn't an opportunity anymore to make sure that they're never trying to focus on too many things all at once. So I think that word focus is just something we don't see enough of and does make a massive difference. And finally, thinking about the mindset of the customer. So again, John Earnshaw, getting into the minds of the consumer. We all know the line so well. But we have had a really good talk recently as well from one of our great customers, Julia from StockX, who talked a lot about different ways you could test about what your customers are thinking and feeling about your product. Different tests you can do with your copy and with your call to actions, with everything. So it's remembering that Google isn't just your only audience, but your customers obviously at the end of that journey as well. Do you have any final thoughts on any of that, John?
No, just that Julia's talk actually blew my mind. Actually, it was one fantastic. And if you haven't seen it already, and we've got a recording of it, people should definitely watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it'll be on our website, and I think she has a very impressive degree, which is so impressive. I won't even be able to pronounce it, let alone complete the degree. So. Great, so I think that's the end of our webinar today. Thanks so much for joining. We do have another webinar coming up on the 17th of June about how to blend your PPC and SEO strategies to boost search ROI. So we've talked a lot about it today, but starting... Sorry, could you say that again? Honestly, sorry, Apple's always listening. So how to blend your PPC and SEO strategies to boost your ROI. So as I said, we've talked about it loads today, but those two teams are so crucial working together. And we're going to give you a couple of tips about how you can improve those relationships and gain growth off the back of it. And we'll be joined by our partners, Canase, who are an amazing PPC agency, to go through how they've seen people do this really successfully. And as we said, there'll also be a follow-up webinar on the May core update stuff. So that's everything for now. Thanks so much, John Barker, for joining us. You've been a great stand-in. I think we just need to get you a shed and then you'll be a full backup.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.